This is the Twilight Whispers Club. The sky dims, the wind stills, and somewhere between day and night, a story leans in to speak. These whispers aren't loud, but they stay with you. You've been invited. Lean in close and listen. These plaster confines, meant only for shelter, have begun to breathe. Ilara hadn't sought communion with architecture, merely convenience, a perch near her workplace, a quiet corner that wouldn't bleed her finances dry. This compact space, nestled on the third floor of a venerable downtown edifice, seemed adequate. Its tall windows surveyed the ceaseless urban river below, a view she found strangely comforting, and the commute was blissfully brief. Initial impressions were starkly utilitarian. A previous occupant had wielded white paint with indiscriminate zeal, leaving behind the faint aroma of aged plaster and industrial cleaner. Nothing untoward, Ilara assured herself. She'd known older buildings, their quirks and groans, none harboring malice. That first night, optimism flickered. This place, she mused, might just be restorative. The shift began subtly, coinciding with her decision to banish the oppressive white. Peeling paint, initially dismissed as trivial imperfections near the living room corners, beckoned. Supplies procured, a pale cerulean hue envisioned to invite light. She embarked on the transformation one Saturday morning. Furniture draped and shifted, plastic sheeting unfurled, Ilara set to scraping, preparing the surface for adhesion. Minutes into the task, beneath the flaken white, anomalies emerged, faint lines, deliberate traceries scored into the plaster. Pausing, she leaned closer. Not random fissures, but glyphs, intricate and unfamiliar, etched as if by a stylus, long dulled. Their precision felt unnerving, calculated. Curiosity, sharp and sudden, spurred her onward. With each section of paint surrendered, more symbols materialized, coalescing into a fragmented circular pattern near the baseboard. Her fingertips traced the indentations, cool and definite against the surrounding smoothness. Someone had invested considerable time here, carving this secret script before diligently burying it beneath layers of concealing paint. A tremor ran through her, part apprehension, part the thrill of unearthing the clandestine. More scraping revealed the sigils linked, a chain of arcane characters winding along the wall, punctuated by smaller scattered marks, whose purpose remained elusive. She documented them with her phone, a digital breadcrumb trail for later investigation. Evening descended, weariness settling into Ilara's arms, paint dust coating her throat. She surveyed the living room, a chaotic landscape of paint chips and protective coverings. The partially exposed designs seemed to observe her, ancient eyes in the plaster. Seeking distraction, she let the television murmur while she consumed a hasty meal. Exhaustion promised deep sleep, yet around the stark hour of 2, she jolted awake, heart hammering against her ribs without apparent cause. No nightmare lingered, only a profound sense of disruption. Silence reigned, thick and watchful. Then it began. A faint rhythmic scratching from the wall just beyond her headboard, like fingernails drawn across stone. Not loud, but insistent. Scrape. Pause. Scrape. Pause. Holding her breath, Ilara listened, mind scrambling for rational explanations. Rodents, settling pipes. but the cadence felt too deliberate, too mindful. A cold prickle traced her skin. Her pulse throbbed visibly in her neck. Action felt preferable to paralysis. Sliding from bed, she pressed her ear against the cool plaster. The scratching ceased abruptly. In its place, a whisper slithered through the wall. A low, rasping susurrus, articulating syllables foreign to any known tongue, seeming to emanate from the very heart of the concrete. She recoiled, legs unsteady, fumbling for the light switch. Bathed in sudden brightness, she stood panting, scanning the room. Only the refrigerator's soft hum disturbed the quiet. Sleep eventually claimed her on the couch, the lights defiantly burning. The following morning brought a residue of tension. Work demanded normalcy, so Ilara forced the night's strangeness aside, attributing it to fatigue and imagination. Coffee acquired en route, the office provided a temporary reprieve, yet unease lingered. Her thoughts kept snagging on the cryptic symbols. During lunch, a furtive phone search yielded nothing conclusive, tantalizing glimpses of archaic scripts, occult diagrams, but no precise match for the wall's peculiar markings. By day's end, the knot in her stomach had tightened, pulling her homeward with a morbid need to know if the apartment held further revelations. Returning, she found the air thick with dust motes dancing in the afternoon light, the smell stale, expectant. The living room walls, scarred by her scraping, waited. In daylight, the mess seemed mundane. Attempting to shed her anxiety, she resumed her task. The deeper her scraper probed, the more intricate the carvings became. Larger sigils emerged, incised with forceful depth, interspersed with delicate, almost microscopic figures. It was a tapestry, woven into the very structure of the room. A slight tremor afflicted her hands, yet compulsion overrode caution. Circles nestled within circles, intersecting lines formed baffling geometries. Star-like patterns defied recognition. By evening, a significant portion lay bare. More photographs joined the growing digital archive. That night, sleep remained elusive. The television offered little solace, her gaze repeatedly drawn to the marked walls. Around midnight, soft footfalls echoed in the corridor outside her door, followed by a delicate tapping against the wall near the kitchen. Ilara rose slowly, pulse accelerating. The tapping migrated, halting near the window. She crossed the room, flicked on the light, peered out at the familiar streetscape. Lamps, passing vehicles, nothing amiss. Then, a sound directly behind her. A sigh, perhaps, or the quietest exhalation. Muscles locked. She spun around. Empty room, half-peeled walls, painting supplies in disarray. Her heart hammered violently. Switching off the light, feeling dangerously exposed, she retreated to the couch, huddled in the darkness, every settling groan of the old building amplifying her fear. Rest was fractured, shallow. An encounter in the hallway the next day offered grim context. An elderly gentleman, residing 2 doors down, responded to Ilara's cautious inquiries about previous tenants with a troubled frown. Several occupants, he recalled, had cycled through her unit in recent years, none staying long. One, he confided, had spoken of shadows glimpsed at odd hours, spectral forms drifting across walls as if migrating between rooms. That tenant departed abruptly, explanation unspoken. The neighbor himself experienced no disturbances, but admitted unease clung to rumors surrounding Ilara's specific apartment. Her stomach clenched. She was not the first. The conversation solidified her resolve. twisting it into a paradoxical knot. Part of her craved oblivion, longed to slather paint over the disturbing etchings and pretend ignorance. Yet another, more primal urge insisted on seeing the entirety of the hidden script. The building caretaker, questioned during the lease signing, had offered no warnings. A sense of betrayal soured her apprehension, but the lease was binding, escape financially prohibitive. Perhaps, she reasoned, uncovering the full scope of the carvings might reveal a pattern, a meaning, a way to counteract whatever presence lingered. Armed with a fresh scraper, she recommenced the excavation. Tiny grooves radiated from the main symbols, suggestive of meticulous work with a fine blade. Her fingertips grew raw, dust settling like a shroud on her clothes and hair. A distinct chill permeated the room, defying the heater's efforts. Her breathing grew shallow, each newly revealed shape triggering a spike in her heart rate. Repeating motifs began to emerge, looping lines and geometric forms creating an encompassing pattern around the living room. No figures, no anthropomorphic representations, just this abstract, unsettling language inscribed on the walls. An ancient ritual, perhaps? A warding? Or something else entirely? The deliberateness was palpable, a code left dormant. That night, the scratching returned, nomadic and insidious, sometimes near a corner, sometimes high by the ceiling. Flashlight in hand, Ilara stalked the sounds, pressing her ear to the plaster. It was undeniably inside, like fingernails burrowing through concrete, inching closer. Her pulse roared, sweat beaded on her palms. Intermittently, the whispers resurfaced, soft, guttural chants rising and falling, words frustratingly unintelligible. Gooseflesh prickled her skin, the hair on her neck erect. The urge to flee warred with a desperate need to understand. Her phone, wielded as a recording device, captured only static and faint clicks, stubbornly deaf to the spectral voices. Days blurred into a sleepless haze. Focus at work disintegrated. Colleagues inquired about her pallor, the bloodshot eyes, the tension etched into her posture. Nights became vigils, ears straining for the slightest anomaly. The walls themselves seemed to possess a subtle respiration. The living room symbols pulsed with a latent energy that frayed her nerves. One evening, a shadow detached itself from the periphery, flowed across the wall, and seemed to merge momentarily with the carved lines before vanishing. Ilara cried out, a strangled sound. She scrambled into the hall, activating every light switch, searching frantically, hands trembling. Nothing. Only the oppressive weight of emptiness. This was no figment. Something shared her space, aware and reactive. Further conversations with neighbors yielded fragments. A woman hesitantly shared an old rumor. The building, decades ago, allegedly hosted clandestine gatherings, rituals conducted by an obscure group. Tales persisted of hidden carvings, nocturnal ceremonies, voices murmuring from within the structure. She shrugged, uncertain of the veracity, but cautioned Ilara nonetheless. A call to the landlord proved fruitless. He feigned ignorance, dismissing her concerns about symbols and activity as products of an old building's character. When pressed, his denial faltered, a tremor of nervousness betraying him before he abruptly ended the call. A crushing pressure now settled in Ilara's chest upon entering the apartment. Every sound startled her. Music and headphones offered only partial insulation against the relentless scratching. which intensified in darkness, burrowing directly into her consciousness alongside the sibilant whispers. The feeling of being observed became constant, a tangible presence just behind her shoulder, always dissolving upon turning. Her hands developed a persistent tremor. Breathing grew ragged as dusk fell. Lamps burned through the night, but merely sharpened the shadows lurking in corners. One evening, driven by a morbid curiosity, she conducted an experiment. Entering the bedroom, she pressed her ear firmly against the shared wall, breathing slowly, waiting. Silence, then her own heartbeat. Finally, the scratching commenced, infinitesimally soft, yet seeming to approach, responding to her proximity. "Who's there?" she whispered, voice brittle. A pause stretched, thick with anticipation. Then the reply, a rasping exhalation from the concrete depths, forming alien words in that harsh, guttural tone. She stumbled back, collapsing onto the bed, teeth chattering, struggling for breath. Communication, however fractured, had occurred. That night, the sensation of being watched intensified exponentially, becoming almost tactile, as if an unseen entity stood inches away. A movie flickered unheeded. Her gaze kept darting to the living room wall, catching fleeting movements at the edge of her vision, flickers of profound blackness shifting across the symbols. Her scalp tingled, nausea churned in her stomach. Sweat broke out across her skin. A desperate resolve formed. The symbols had to be concealed again. Whether this would appease or enrage the presence was unknown, but leaving them exposed felt like an open invitation. The next day saw her return from the store, laden with heavy-duty primer and more paint. Hours were spent meticulously applying the thick, viscous primer, filling every groove, every line, burying the carvings beneath an obliterating coat of white. She fought against the rising fear, the possibility of provoking something ancient and territorial. Faint groaning sounds seemed to emanate from the wall itself, a low vibration of protest. Her hands shook, but she persisted until the last symbol vanished. The room reeked of chemicals. Her head throbbed with fumes and tension. Tools stowed, she collapsed onto the couch, heart pounding, breath shallow, waiting through the tense hours until midnight. Surely, she reasoned, this entity fed on disturbance. Having disturbed it profoundly, she was now irrevocably marked. For a few hours, an unnerving silence settled. Exhaustion finally dragged Ilara into a fitful doze. She awoke near 3 a.m. The sound was unmistakable, a slow, methodical scraping, louder now, more determined. Leaping up, chest constricting, she listened. It felt as if something was deliberately carving its way back through her fresh layer of primer. A chill traced her spine. Her eyes stung with panic. Snatching the flashlight, she ran to the living room wall. Faint hairline cracks spiderwebbed across the new paint, originating from within, as if claws were scoring the plaster beneath, seeking to re-expose the sigils. The beam illuminated flakes of primer beginning to lift. Then, abruptly, silence descended again, heavy and charged. Her body felt encased in ice. Now, Ilara exists within this cycle of dread. The presence in the walls is undeniable, its objection to concealment made terrifyingly clear. It permeates the living room, haunts her attempts at sleep. Every creak, every settling sigh of the building is a potential precursor. Calling for help feels futile. Who would believe symbols scratched into plaster could harbor such sentience, such malice? Yet the voices were real, the carvings imbued with purpose. The more she resists, the more palpable the entity becomes. Leaving means breaking the lease, a financial impossibility, yet staying chips away at her sanity. Sleep is a forgotten luxury. Her hands tremble whenever she enters the living room. A crawling sensation prickles her nape near the walls. Shadows writhe in her peripheral vision, coalescing into fleeting shapes that defy confirmation. How this ends is uncertain. What is certain is the walls will not remain quiescent. Painting over them again feels like daring, the scratching to intensify, to break through entirely. Ignoring them allows the presence to linger, watchful, waiting. Trapped, Ilara feels inextricably bound to the symbols, to the entity whispering its alien litany, feeding on her escalating fear. It grows stronger with every flinch, every gasp in the dark. Each night is a new vigil, bracing for the inevitable. And the chilling conviction remains. Once unearthed, these symbols, and whatever guards them, offer no retreat. This thing does not intend to let her go. Highway 16 unfurled like a ribbon of weary asphalt, and somewhere along its length, the navigational device began its quiet betrayal. Its screen, a small rectangle of supposed certainty, stuttered, freezing, then jolting alive, sketching phantom routes across terrain I'd never traversed. 3 relentless days of Seattle negotiations had frayed me down to the nerve endings. The sole desire humming in my veins was the familiar embrace of Portland before the clock bled past midnight. The first tremor of true wrongness arrived via synthesized decree. Exit the main artery, bleed onto Route 107. A glance at the dash clock, 10:42 p.m. This deviation chafed against habit. My finger jabbed the unresponsive touchscreen mounted above the vents. The insistent blue trajectory remained, mocking my skepticism. Take exit 47B to Route 107, the machine intoned again, devoid of inflection, sterile as a surgeon's blade. My grip tightened on the leather-wrapped wheel. The off-ramp loomed, a sudden gash in the night. Perhaps, I reasoned, some unseen snarl of metal or patient roadwork blocked the usual path. 4 hours welded to the Audi's seat had left my spine singing a dull ache. The lure of a potential shortcut, a balm to fatigue, proved irresistible. I veered onto the exit. Route 107 commenced benignly, a 2-lane scar through timberland thick as felt. The pavement beneath felt older, coarser, transmitting a rougher vibration through the chassis. My headlamps sliced the gloom, illuminating a yellow median line, fractured and faded like an old memory. No sodium lamps offered solace here. No companion taillights bled red in the distance. My phone, inert in its cradle, offered no second opinion. Both hands remained clamped to the wheel, white-knuckled. Trees surged towards the tarmac, skeletal branches interlacing overhead, swallowing the meager moonlight that seeped through bruised clouds. The navigation screen flickered, a technological epileptic fit. The blue line vanished, then reappeared, transposed onto an unfamiliar thread of road. Recalculating, announced the impassive voice. Turn right in 500 feet. I leaned towards the windshield, eyes straining to pierce the oppressive dark where the turn supposedly lay. No signage, merely a slender dirt track dissolving into blackness. This is madness, I breathed, the words sounding alien in the car's sealed silence. My hand reached again for the device, intent on wresting back control. The screen plunged into absolute black. A tap yielded nothing. The power button remained stubbornly inert. Slowing the vehicle, I scanned for any verge, any driveway offering sanctuary for a U-turn. The road offered no quarter, flanked by steep, unforgiving ditches. The forest pressed right to the edge, forming a claustrophobic arboreal tunnel. Reversal demanded an intersection, a break in this relentless green corridor. Suddenly, the screen blazed back to life, an unnerving sapphire glow in the Stygian interior. The map depicted terra incognita, adrift in a sea of blank green. No names, no landmarks, only the stark blue vector urging me onward. Continue straight for 2.7 miles, the voice commanded, now subtly warped, as if transmitted across static-laden miles. I stabbed at the home icon. Futile. Attempts to zoom out met with glassy indifference. My headlights snagged on motion within the tree line, a branch, swaying, surely. Yet the air hung utterly still, breathless. The road coiled sharply left. As the beams swept the curve, they grazed something pallid amongst the trunks, gone before my mind could sculpt it into form. Sweat slicked my palms against the steering wheel. Another flicker from the screen. The map dissolved into digital snow, then black, then resurfaced, placing me deeper still within that void of nameless green. Turn right in 100 feet, the voice insisted, its texture degrading further, acquiring a ragged, buzzing edge. I disregarded it. The path ahead stretched clear, straight. My foot found the accelerator, urging the Audi past 60, towards 70. The engine's thrum filled the cabin, a desperate attempt to drown out the corrupted guidance. The headlamps faltered, a momentary dimming, yet enough to knot my stomach. A frantic check of the dashboard displays, all nominal. But they dimmed again, holding the fade longer this time. Darkness pressed against the glass like a physical weight, palpable. Something blurred across the road far ahead, too swift for definition, low-slung, like a running figure but wrong, its motion defying mechanics. My foot spasmed towards the brake. The GPS screen strobed violently, white, black, white. The voice returned, thick with distortion, barely recognizable. Stop. Vehicle. Immediately. An obscenity formed on my lips, though my velocity was already inexplicably decaying. The engine note soured, RPMs plummeting despite the steady pressure of my foot. The car coasted to a halt, stranded mid-lane. I twisted the key. The engine churned, a futile cough, refusing to catch. Again. Silence. The dashboard lights fluttered, then expired. Silence crashed inwards, profound, absolute. The kind city dwellers never know, heavy as velvet curtains. My own respiration roared in my ears, syncopated with the frantic drumming of my heart. The dead GPS screen became the sole illumination, its map replaced by scrolling glyphs and numbers I couldn't decipher, moving with blinding speed, casting ephemeral blue shadows across the dash. Movement drew my eye upward. The cabin's dome light pulsed erratically, on, off, random, meaningless. Other interior lights joined the spectral disco, strobing, fracturing the darkness. making my temples throb. A sound, scratching, high on the roof, like fingernails dragged across sheet metal. It migrated, rear to front, pausing directly overhead. I froze, breath trapped in my chest. The scratching resumed, more insistent. A concavity appeared in the headliner, pushing downwards. Something was up there. My fingers scrabbled for the phone. Its screen remained stubbornly black. Power button, home button, nothing stirred it from its coma. The scratching shifted, now scraping against the driver's side window. A primal command screamed, "Don't look." But my head turned, a traitor to self-preservation. A face pressed to the glass, viscous, pale, elongated. In the strobing chaos, features remained indistinct, save for voids where eyes should have been. A choked scream tore from my throat. The visage vanished. Tapping commenced, all around the car's shell, like myriad fingernails drumming a frantic rhythm on the metal skin. The vehicle shuddered. The interior lights pulsed faster, a blinding staccato. Peripheral vision caught movement in the woods, tenebrous shapes slithing between tree trunks. More faces bloomed against the windows, pressing close. The tapping intensified, escalating to pounding. The GPS screen went berserk, cycling through colors: crimson, emerald, sapphire, stark white. The distorted voice shrieked, "Exit vehicle, now!" "Never," I whispered, hands trembling as I wrestled with the ignition key once more. The engine gave a strangled gasp, then died. A brutal impact struck the windshield, blossoming a spiderweb of fractures across the safety glass. Another blow. The cracks deepened, spread. The drumming on the roof found a rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. A monstrous heartbeat. The dents in the headliner pulsed deeper with each concussion. A glance in the rearview mirror. Empty back seat. Then, not empty. A shadow coalesced there, blacker than the surrounding blackness, shapeless yet undeniably present, and growing. The GPS screen detonated in a shower of sparks and glass shards rained onto the dash. The interior lights achieved peak frenzy, flickering so rapidly they blurred into a constant, nauseating glare. The shadow in the back seat flowed forward. I felt an impossible cold breath on the nape of my neck. My hand found the door lever. I threw myself outwards, hitting the packed earth hard, tumbling into the ditch. Grit and decaying leaves filled my mouth. Agony lanced through my shoulder. I scrambled upright, propelled by raw terror, and ran. No looking back. The strobing lights of the violated car cast frantic, leaping shadows among the trees. Whipping branches clawed at my face. Unseen roots snagged at my ankles. Behind me, a cacophony, the shriek of tortured metal as my Audi was rent asunder, punctuated by clicks, whistles, and guttural utterances that hinted at a language I prayed never to comprehend. I ran until my lungs burned like acid, until the frantic lights behind were swallowed by distance, until the only sounds were the desperate tattoo of my own feet on the dirt track and the ragged tearing of my breath. Ahead, a clearing emerged. Moonlight revealed derelict structures, the skeletal remains of some forgotten factory or mill. Broken windows gaped like vacant maws. Rusted metal surfaces offered dull, malevolent gleams. The choice was stark: the dubious shelter of the ruins or the relentless woods. The clicking and whistling pursued, closer now, articulating their alien wrongness. I chose the buildings. sprinted across the exposed ground towards the nearest structure, its door hanging askew from a single tortured hinge. I squeezed through the opening into profound darkness, my eyes strained, pupils dilating, struggling to adapt. The air hung thick with the scent of dust and decay. Somewhere within, water dripped with metronomic slowness. My footfalls echoed unnervingly on the concrete floor. Finding a corner, I pressed my back against the cold, rough brick, forcing my breathing towards silence, listening. The external sounds ceased abruptly. Utter silence descended. Even the dripping water held its breath. A scraping noise directly overhead. Something shifting on the roof. More scraping, closer now from within the walls. They were encompassing the building. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Impossible. It was dead. Yet, pulling it out, the screen glowed. Not my familiar interface, but stark white text against a black void. Wrong turn. The screen flared once, brilliantly, then died again. In that fleeting illumination, I saw them, pouring through the shattered window frames, unspooling down the walls, reaching towards me with fingers impossibly long and thin. Flight again. Through Stygian corridors, up groaning metal stairwells, always ascending. They were behind, beside, above, their movement fluid, unnatural, hurting the eyes to witness. I burst onto the roof. Moonlight bathed a desolate panorama. Empty walls, vacant windows, decaying industrial sprawl stretching in every direction. No roads, no lights, no vestige of the world I knew. The GPS voice spoke, issuing not from any device, but from the air itself, from everywhere and nowhere. You have reached your destination. They emerged from the roof access hatch, hauled themselves over the parapets, coalesced from the shadows like smoke given horrifying form. I retreated, stumbling backwards until my heel met the precipice. 4 stories of air lay between me and the concrete below. I looked down. Then I looked at the encroaching things. The choice was brutally simple. I jumped. The impact never arrived. Instead, my eyes snapped open. I was back in the Audi, on Highway 16. The navigation screen displayed my customary route to Portland. The dashboard clock read 10:42 p.m. My hands shook violently on the steering wheel. Exit 47B approached, its sign for Route 107 glowing unnervingly familiar in my headlights. The GPS screen flickered, just once. I drove past the exit, foot hard on the accelerator. I didn't stop, didn't slow, until the lights of Portland embraced me. The first thing I did upon reaching home was wrench the GPS from its mount and hurl it into the depths of a garbage bin. Now, I always take the circuitous route around that stretch of Highway 16. My eyes constantly flick to the rearview mirror, an ingrained, nervous tick. Sometimes, in the deepest hours of the night, I wake convinced I hear faint clicking and whistling just beyond my window pane. And whenever I glimpse a navigational screen flicker, even momentarily, a tremor starts in my hands. Because I know what lingers down those wrong turns, inhabiting the dark interstices between known places where maps dissolve into nonsense and roads lead only to dissolution. They are still waiting. And sometimes, adrift in the lonely hours before dawn, a chilling thought surfaces. Did I truly escape? Or am I perpetually falling from that rooftop, forever poised to awaken again at 10:42 p.m., bearing down on exit 47B, where the nightmare endlessly restarts? Certainty remains elusive. But this much I know. I will never take that exit again. Never follow where those entities beckon. Some turns once made echo forever. Some roads are not meant for return journeys. The space on my dashboard where the screen once sat remains vacant and dark, and that absence is the only comfort I allow myself. The camera's power indicator glowed a defiant 3% when I glanced down at 4:37 a.m. That precise minute remains etched, a timestamp dividing normalcy from the cascade that followed. I stood where the path entered Whispering Ash Preserve, tripod canted across one shoulder, spare power cells nestled securely within my coat. January's chill gnawed at any exposed flesh with its customary spite. This ritual was ingrained. Rouse at 3:45, a 40-minute drive to the preserve's edge, then the 2-mile trek towards Kestrel's Perch to await the sunrise with my lens. Amateur photography, my solace from the drone of selling financial securities. Capturing dawn's first blush, my particular obsession. Or so I believed before that singular morning. Gravel scraped beneath my boots as I struck out onto the trail. My headlamp beam sliced a stark corridor through the enveloping blackness, occasionally glinting off reflective markers tacked to trees. Pine and damp, decaying leaf litter offered their familiar, earthy perfume to the frigid air. A delicate lacework of frost, spun overnight, gave the ground a faint, brittle resistance underfoot. The initial mile unspooled uneventfully. My breath plumed visibly. A steady burn began to climb my thighs with the trail's incline. A furtive check of my watch, 4:52 a.m. Good pace. With sunrise not due until 6:43, ample time remained to reach the perch, to scout the ideal composition. Disquiet began near the trail's bifurcation, where one fork angled toward Kestrel's Perch, the other descended toward the Hollow Creek path. Through the skeletal trees to my right, down the Hollow Creek way, an unusual luminescence flickered. My first thought, another early riser, a fellow photographer perhaps. Yet the light behaved erratically, pulsing with a contained cerulean white intensity, akin to heat lightning trapped beneath the forest canopy, yet utterly silent. It pirouetted between the trunks, casting bizarre, elongated shadows that seemed to writhe upon the frosted earth. Instinct screamed, camera. Whatever this phenomenon, it promised an unparalleled image. I extinguished my headlamp, minimizing contamination, and raised the camera. Through the viewfinder, the lights resolved with greater clarity. They moved in geometries that mocked physics, splitting, coalescing, spiraling around ancient bark, ricocheting from bare branches. A silent arboreal discotheque. My hands trembled as I wrestled with the settings. ISO 3200, f2.8, shutter speed 1/160th. I fired off several exposures. The LCD screen, however, offered only impenetrable darkness, punctuated by indistinct smears of light. It was as if the lights existed just outside the spectrum my camera could perceive, phantoms refusing capture. Logic whispered possibilities, ball lightning, some rare atmospheric plasma. But ball lightning doesn't weave patterns. It lacks intent. These lights moved as if imbued with consciousness, performing a pre-dawn ballet in the frozen woods. Proximity became imperative. Prudence dictated staying on the marked path, observing from afar. Yet 2 decades chasing light had taught me the finest captures rarely rewarded caution. Securing the tripod more firmly to my pack, I began angling through the dense undergrowth towards the spectral display. The terrain pitched sharply downwards here. My boots slid precariously on the frost-kissed leaves. I stumbled repeatedly, bracing myself against the rough, cold bark of trees. Ahead, perhaps 100 yards distant, the lights continued their hypnotic dance, maintaining their interval regardless of my pace. My respiration grew ragged, exertion warring with the cold, as sweat began to prickle beneath my thermal layers. Another glance at my watch. 5:14 a.m. The eastern horizon remained stubbornly black. Between the trees, the darkness felt absolute, save for those captivating luminous sprites. After another 15 minutes of cautious scrambling, I saw the lights cease their movement. They hovered now within a small clearing just ahead, pulsing with that same uncanny blue-white radiance. I sank behind a fallen, moss-covered log, raising the camera once more. The battery icon now blinked a critical 2%. Still, I had to try. The clearing swam into focus. The lights hung suspended about 6 feet from the ground, clustered like a swarm of immense, silent fireflies. Each orb approximated the size of a softball, yet radiated no discernible heat despite their brilliance. Indeed, the air seemed to acquire an extra edge of cold the nearer I drew. I depressed the shutter. The click echoed, obscenely loud in the profound stillness. The lights reacted instantaneously. They scattered wildly, like a startled flock, but instead of dispersing outwards, they began to spiral inwards with accelerating velocity, converging into a tight, incandescent column that stretched vertically from the forest floor to the highest branches. The fine hairs on my arms lifted. An audible crackle of static electricity charged the air. My camera's screen abruptly went black. Simultaneously, I felt the spare battery in my pocket surge with unnatural heat against my leg. I dropped both camera and battery instinctively, just as a piercing high-frequency whine saturated the air, escalating until my teeth vibrated painfully in their sockets. What transpired next unfolded with bewildering speed, outpacing comprehension. The column of light detonated outwards in a blinding, omnidirectional wave. When my vision swam back into focus seconds later, the clearing was plunged back into darkness, yet it was not empty. Movement stirred the frost-covered leaves, footprints, appearing sequentially, impressed into the delicate rime as if by invisible feet traversing the small space. Their pattern, however, was chaos. They overlapped, crisscrossed haphazardly, some pointing one way, others the exact opposite. Some sank deep, suggesting immense weight. Others barely skimmed the surface. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence, as I watched these phantom impressions materialize. They appeared faster now, more erratically, describing a frenzied, impossible choreography. Then, as abruptly as they had begun, they ceased. The final set of prints led to the clearing's very center and simply ended, vanished into the frigid air. I remained frozen behind the log, time losing all meaning, perhaps minutes, perhaps an eternity. My hands shook so violently, I struggled to hold my flashlight steady. Summoning a fragile courage, I finally moved to examine the clearing. The flashlight's beam confirmed the print's reality, stark against the frost. I forced myself into a semblance of methodical observation, like documenting an inexplicable scene. The impressions varied wildly in size and depth. Some resembled human feet, size 10 or 11 perhaps. Others were diminutive, childlike, and some bore no resemblance to any terrestrial creature I knew. Elongated, with strange, spur-like protrusions where digits should be, their shape hinted at a gait utterly alien. My light snagged on something metallic near the clearing's center. My camera lay face down in the leaf litter, its battery compartment sprung open, empty. The spare battery from my pocket was gone without a trace. The camera body itself felt arctic to the touch, colder than the ambient air, as if pulled from deep cryo storage. The eastern sky bled the first faint suggestion of gray when I finally gathered my wits and my useless equipment. My watch face was frozen at 5:14 a.m., its digital display inert despite a battery less than a year old. My phone showed 6:22 a.m., but the screen flickered intermittently, the compass app spinning in useless, frantic circles. One last survey of the clearing before retreating. The footprints remained, tangible yet ephemeral, already softening as the approaching dawn began to sublimate the frost. By the time the sun properly breached the horizon, they would be utterly gone. I possessed no photographs, no tangible proof, only the fragile architecture of memory. The hike back to the car was a hurried, nerve-jangled affair. I clung religiously to the marked trail, moving with clumsy speed in the strengthening light. Every rustle in the undergrowth sent jolts of adrenaline through me. Every shadow pooled between the trees seemed to harbor watching eyes. The woods felt subtly altered, a familiar space, subtly but profoundly rearranged. I reached the deserted parking lot just as the sun crested the eastern ridge, spilling gold across the landscape. My car sat alone as I'd left it, but not entirely unchanged. Across the frost coating the windshield, a pattern had materialized. Not the random feathery crystals of natural ice, but a precise series of concentric circles, flawlessly rendered, interspersed with angular, unfamiliar symbols. Before I could retrieve my ice scraper from the trunk, the strengthening sun touched the glass, and the intricate design dissolved into rivulets of water, leaving only a fading mental image, like the details of a receding dream. I haven't returned to Whispering Ash Preserve since that morning. My camera, despite new batteries and memory cards, remains inert. The images I believed I captured of the lights simply do not exist. My watch eventually resumed ticking, though its accuracy remains perpetually suspect. Sometimes on crisp, clear mornings, gazing from my window towards the distant preserve, I fancy I see fugitive glimmers of blue-white light deep among the trees. I no longer feel the urge to investigate. Some phenomena resist documentation. Some enigmas are best left undisturbed. The insurance brokerage where I pass my days overlooks the preserve. During slow afternoons, my gaze invariably drifts to that expanse of trees, pondering what transpired in the pre-dawn chill. Rationalizations, plasma, swamp gas, collective delusion, crumble under the weight of the experience. The footprints were undeniably real. The frost patterns were undeniably intricate and strange. Last week, a new prospective client arrived, seeking coverage for his photography enterprise. He spoke of recent sunrise excursions into Whispering Ash, mentioning something peculiar. Lights, he'd murmured, down in the hollows, like nothing I ever saw. He inquired hesitantly, If our policies extended to equipment damage caused by inexplicable electrical surges. I sold him our most robust package. I also gently suggested he might find sunset photography equally rewarding. Certain locales, I implied, are best seated to the darkness in those liminal hours before dawn, when the familiar world wears a different, thinner skin, and strange illuminations dance between the trees, leaving only questions and dissolving footprints behind. The tripod from that morning still resides in my closet. Occasionally retrieving it, I notice its metallic legs are unnaturally cold to the touch, even amidst summer's heat. And if one looks very, very closely at the alloy surface, faint etchings are visible, minute concentric circles interspersed with angular symbols, mirroring precisely the pattern that bloomed and vanished on my windshield. The thought of submitting it for analysis, of seeking expert opinion, arises periodically, but invariably I return it to the darkness of the closet. Some questions perhaps breed only deeper questions. Some mysteries persist, yet I keep the tripod, a cold metallic reminder that what I witnessed was not imagined, that for a sliver of time in a frost-rimed clearing, I brushed against something profoundly other. And somewhere, out in the unlit spaces between the trees, those lights continue their silent, inexplicable ballet, awaiting the next curious soul, drawn unwisely towards their glow. Monday unfurled itself across a pewter sky, the wind pressing down like a damp hand as I navigated the rutted track towards the farmhouse. 2 duffels resided in the boot of my car. A worn leather satchel containing my laptop was slung across my chest. Before disturbing the silence further by unloading, I circled the structure. Its skin was aged parchment, paint flaking like sunburnt skin, fissures spiderwebbing near the window frames. The front porch sagged, its boards warped, a single step canted at an awkward angle. Enveloping the property were fields of desiccated grass, hemmed by dilapidated fencing. A scattering of trees, gnarled and denuded, stood stark against the gloom further out. And there, impaled in the tired soil, several scarecrows presided, their burlap faces tilted towards the bruised horizon. 3 silent figures, widely spaced. Ordinary enough, I thought, mere effigies against the vastness. My purpose here was solitude, the quiet necessary for weaving words. Unexplained occurrences were not part of the itinerary. That first twilight saw me wresting my belongings indoors. The farmhouse interior exhaled simplicity. A diminutive living space offered a threadbare sofa, a solitary armchair, a low table. To the right, the kitchen presented an antiquated refrigerator, humming a low thrum beside a gas stove. The lone bedroom felt constricted, holding only a narrow bed and a scarred dresser. In the bathroom, the sink faucet coughed and sputtered under my testing hand. I moved through the rooms, a procession of flipped switches. Some bulbs flickered into reluctant life, others buzzed with a weary resonance. Floorboards groaned their protests beneath my weight. Door hinges whined their metallic complaints. An aroma clung to the air. Damp, ancient wood, the ghost of countless rains. But I chose to disregard it, setting up my laptop on the kitchen table amidst a scattering of notes. Later, as daylight bled from the sky, I returned to the porch, leaning against the railing. Its surface met my palm with the rough texture of splintered wood. My gaze swept the fields, searching the deepening obscurity for any deviation from the norm. Initially, only stillness reigned. The tall grasses shivered subtly. The scarecrows maintained their posts, static against the fading light. No flicker of movement caught my eye. No sound disturbed the quiet, save the faint susurrus of unseen leaves. Night deepened. Inside, immersed in the rhythmic clatter of keys, I froze. A distinct creak emanated from the front porch, the sound of weight settling on a loose board. Yet, peering through the window revealed nothing but empty, moon-washed planks. The porch stood deserted beneath a sky scrubbed clean of clouds, the air utterly still. I remained at the window, watchful. Again, the wood groaned, an impossible sound in the vacant space. Slowly, cautiously, I unlatched the door, scanning the immediate vicinity. No impressions marred the dust. No figure lingered. I secured the door, the bolt sliding home with a decisive click. Returning to my work, a new sound insinuated itself into my awareness, a faint, rhythmic dripping. I rose, tracking the source. The kitchen sink taps were tightly closed. The bathroom fixtures remained dry. Outside, no rain fell. I craned my neck, inspecting the ceiling for stains or damp patches. Nothing. Still, the sound persisted. Drip, drip, drip. Methodically, I opened cabinets, peered into shadowed corners, knelt to press my ear near the floorboards. The sound seemed embedded within the very walls, elusive, its origin undiscoverable. Defeated after a time, I retreated, attempting to tune out the maddening cadence, forcing my attention back to the screen. Sleep proved elusive that night. The mattress offered little comfort, and I drifted in and out of consciousness, startled awake more than once by the distinct impression of footsteps crunching softly outside. Each time, investigation revealed nothing. Dawn arrived gray and uncertain. Stepping outside, I surveyed the fields. The 3 scarecrows occupied new positions. The previous evening, they had faced outward, towards the vast expanse. Now, one stared directly at the farmhouse, another regarded the empty road, and the third bowed its straw-stuffed head towards the earth. A frown tightened my brow as I walked towards them. Close up, they retained their mundane construction. Cast-off clothing packed with dry grasses, hats tugged low. I reached out, touching one frayed sleeve. The texture was merely old fabric and brittle straw. No concrete proof of their nocturnal migration existed, yet an unshakable certainty settled within me. They had not stood thus before. The afternoon was dedicated to writing, though my concentration frayed easily. I left the front door slightly ajar, wedged open with a chair, a concession to the need for quick glances outside, should any new strangeness arise. Around noon, a low resonance drifted from the fields, not a voice, but something akin to a profound sigh or a deep guttural hum. Pushing the door wider, I stepped onto the porch. The tall grass rippled and swayed with an unnatural vigor, despite the absence of any significant breeze. The vegetation seemed to undulate, suggesting the passage of something substantial beneath its surface. Squinting, I could discern no clear form, only the hypnotic bending and straightening of countless blades. The scarecrows remained scattered, though one now appeared tilted at a peculiar angle. I ventured out a short distance, approaching it cautiously. Within a few feet, the air turned noticeably colder, raising gooseflesh along my arms. The figure's head seemed minutely turned, angled slightly towards me. Had it been so a moment prior? Reaching out, I gave it a tentative nudge, It was anchored fast to its supporting stake. Retreating, I sought the dubious sanctuary of the house. Evening descended, and with it, a renewed effort to immerse myself in work, to ignore the unsettling periphery. A few pages materialized before the familiar sounds returned. First, the porch timbers groaned their familiar complaint. Then, a soft, hesitant tapping brushed against the door. Through the window glass, my own reflection stared back, superimposed on the darkening scene. Beyond it, near the distant fence line, a silhouette took shape. Indistinct in the gloom, it appeared larger than human, hunched, with unnaturally long arms. It slid between the skeletal trees and was swallowed by the deeper shadows behind them. I remained frozen, watching the space where it had been. It did not reappear. Later, ensconced in the living room's pool of light, my gaze drifted towards the glass door at the rear of the house. A shape coalesced against the pane, a face. I recoiled, nearly tumbling from my chair. It was a pallid mask, vaguely translucent, the suggestions of eyes and a mouth blurred like condensation. It lingered for a heartbeat, perhaps two, then dissolved, leaving behind a fleeting patch of mist on the glass that vanished almost instantly. I scrambled to the door, wrenching it open. Emptiness greeted me. Stepping onto the small back stoop, I scanned the immediate area. The grass lay undisturbed. The packed earth bore no fresh prints. The night held its breath. I slammed the door shut, the lock clicking into place. Sleep was a fractured landscape, punctuated by the incessant dripping within the walls. Around midnight, flashlight in hand, I rose and prowled the house again, a restless investigator. Every corner probed, every surface scrutinized. I rapped knuckles against the walls, listening intently. The dripping maintained its steady, maddening tempo, neither louder nor softer. No puddles formed, no dampness revealed itself. Giving up, I returned to bed, tossing beneath the thin blankets, hearing the phantom footsteps outside, the porch's nocturnal lament. A sound like coarse fabric scraping against wood drifted through the thin walls. Once, a low groan echoed, less human than the protest of some immense weight shifting. Morning light filtered through the dusty windows. My first act was to check the scarecrows. This time, one had demonstrably advanced. It stood near an old fence post, no more than 20 yards from my front porch. Its burlap head seemed tilted upwards, its vacant gaze fixed upon me where I stood. A knot formed in my stomach. After a long moment of staring, I marched directly towards it. The tactile reality remained unchanged. Dry straw, worn clothes, the unyielding stake pinning it upright. Grasping its shoulder, I heaved, attempting to wrench it from the ground. It held fast, immovable. Frustration coiled within me. Defeated, I retreated indoors, pacing the creaking floorboards. A plan formed. Objective evidence. I positioned my phone on the windowsill, angling its lens towards the fields, initiating a video recording. Perhaps the night would yield its secrets to the unblinking eye of the camera. As an added precaution, I barricaded the doors with a clumsy arrangement of chairs and a small table. Every window latch was secured. Then, dimming the lights, I settled into the living room armchair to wait, a nervous energy thrumming beneath my skin. My foot tapped an anxious rhythm. Sweat beaded on my palms. My breath grew shallow. When the porch inevitably groaned, I snatched the flashlight, directing its beam through the window. The wooden planks visibly flexed, dipping slightly, yet remained utterly unoccupied. A scraping noise commenced along the exterior wall, like dragging branches, though no trees grew close enough. Moving to check the back door, I saw it again, the pale visage pressed against the glass. It lingered longer this time. Hollow sockets, the thin line of a nose, a closed mouth. Features devoid of detail, like an unfinished sketch. The fine hairs on my arms prickled. My heart hammered against my ribs. I aimed the flashlight beam directly at it. The face remained impassive, unreactive, an ethereal stain upon the glass. "Who's there?" My voice cracked. No response. Pressing my hand flat against the door, I felt an unnatural cold radiating from the glass. Abruptly, the face vanished. I flung the door open. Nothing. Silence. The door slammed shut once more. Panic clawed at me. I fumbled for my phone. No signal. Stepping outside, I held the device aloft near my car, seeking a connection. Nothing. The fields lay inert under the moon. The scarecrows seemed to have withdrawn, appearing smaller, farther away. The hulking shape from the fence line was absent. No footprints disturbed the dew-kissed ground. A forced calm descended. I resolved to remain awake, to wait out the darkness until sunrise. Back inside, I sat sipping water, listening. The dripping sound waxed and waned, sometimes seeming intimately close, other times receding into the house's ambient sighs. Around 3 a.m, the deep exhalation returned from the fields, long and resonant. Peering through the window, I saw the grass stir again, ripples moving across its surface as if tracing the path of something unseen beneath. Waves of motion flowed towards the house, then receded. I checked the recording on my phone. Frame by frame, it revealed nothing anomalous. The scarecrows stood motionless. The fields appeared empty. Multiple viewings yielded the same frustrating result. Exhaustion mingled with rising dread. My head throbbed. Daylight, I decided, was necessary for clarity. At dawn, I walked the property perimeter, my shoes quickly soaked by the heavy dew. The scarecrows occupied their familiar positions, yet subtle alterations nagged at me. An arm angled higher, a hat tilted differently. Touching them confirmed only their mundane materials. I traced the fence line, the trees silent witnesses. The ground varied from soft loam to hard-packed earth. No tracks, no clues on the porch steps. Beneath the porch, only dirt, cobwebs, decaying leaves. The remainder of the day was spent meticulously searching the farmhouse itself. Closets, drawers, cabinets yielded their meager contents. Rusted tools, forgotten cleaning supplies, moth-eaten blankets. Nothing inherently sinister. The dripping persisted, an internal pulse mocking my efforts. I located and turned off the main water valve. The sound continued unabated. Banging on the walls produced only falling dust, no hidden moisture. The attic, accessed through a ceiling hatch, proved empty, save for brittle cardboard boxes and dry floorboards. No leaks, no source. On the 4th night, exhaustion claimed me for a few hours. I woke near midnight, drenched in sweat, heart pounding. The porch creaked again, but this time rhythmically, insistently, the sound of pacing. Slipping quietly from the couch, I crept to the window. The boards rose and fell in a slow, deliberate cadence, actuated by an invisible walker. I flicked on the flashlight. The movement ceased instantly. Light off. A pause. The pacing resumed. A taunting game played by unseen forces. A tightness constricted my chest. Jaw clenched, I retreated from the window, remaining within the dubious safety of the walls. Later, movement flickered at the edge of my vision, near the fence line. The now familiar shape materialized, hunched, immense, ungainly. It darted between two trees, long legs propelling it with surprising speed, arms swinging low. Utterly silent. A hard swallow. I watched from behind the glass, breath held captive in my chest, observing its disjointed sprints back and forth before it dissolved into the deeper ink beneath the branches. At some point, I must have drifted off again on the couch. The first rays of sun slanted through the grime-streaked windows when I awoke. The air felt thick, stale. Pushing open the front door, I stepped onto the porch. The scarecrow that had stood closest, the one near the fence post, was gone. Only the wooden stake remained, stark against the green. I walked to it. No remnants lay scattered nearby, no stray straw, no torn fabric. Turning, I scanned the fields. My eyes found the missing effigy near the far edge of the property, reunited with its brethren. 3 figures stood together now, a silent congregation. All faced the farmhouse. All wore their hats low, arms stiffly at their sides. A tremor ran through me. My legs felt unsteady. The decision was instantaneous. Pack, leave. The writing could wait, unfinished. Clothes were hastily stuffed into bags, the laptop secured. Locking the farmhouse door felt final. I loaded the car, casting one last look across the fields before getting in. Nothing stirred. The scarecrows stood impassive. The grass remained still. The porch was silent. No dripping sound reached my ears. The windows merely reflected the innocuous morning sky. The engine turned over, a welcome sound of normalcy. I drove away, watching the farmhouse diminish in the rearview mirror until it was consumed by the landscape. My eyes stayed fixed on the road ahead, scanning the trees flanking the track, but nothing moved. I left the farmhouse and its secrets behind. The groaning wood, the phantom drips, the shifting effigies, the spectral faces. Miles down the road, my phone chimed, signal restored. I didn't make a call. I just kept driving, hands tight on the wheel, eyes forward, deliberately erasing the memory of slow creaks, cold glass, and the soft, sighing breath of the fields. Moving on. How long this damnable haze has held me, I cannot reckon. Time itself seems to have dissolved in the suffocating whiteness. A rasp scrapes raw my throat. Punishment for breathing this cold, wet breath of the fog, and a slick chill persists beneath layers meant for warmth. When I first strayed from the marked path, hours ago, a lifetime, the woods possessed a deceptive tranquility. A weekend ascent, a simple prescription to purge the city's clangor from my mind after months immured in my flat. Summit, vista, return before dusk. The plan's elegant simplicity now mocks me. Nothing retains its familiar shape. The trees themselves warp into alien geometries within this opalescent shroud. Everywhere, the white oblivion presses, denser than any mountain fog I've known. It coils and eddies without wind, a living entity breathing itself across the landscape. And the scent, faint, elusive, an antique decay like air, locked too long in a forgotten chest, yet carrying a subtle wrongness that knots the stomach. My eyes sting. Stand still too long, and a vertiginous lurch follows, the very earth seeming to cant beneath my boots like a tilting carousel. I fix my gaze on a looming trunk, mere paces away. Each step towards it is a squelching surrender into sodden leaves and yielding earth. My heart hammers against my ribs, accompanied by a persistent leaden weight in my chest. An undeniable certainty settles. Something is fundamentally awry. Again, the compass comes out. Again, the needle dances a frantic, useless jig, refusing allegiance to any pole. My GPS, its battery full when I departed my rented cabin, nestled in the foothills, remains stubbornly black, a dead eye reflecting only the gloom, a frustrated shake, a muttered curse, futile gestures. Reaching the tree, I sag against its damp bark, gasping, willing the panic to subside. Through the swirling miasma, another form resolves, indistinct, perhaps a dozen feet distant. I freeze, pulse frantic. No sound escapes my lips. I simply observe. Tall, attenuated, hunched slightly forward. Its edges shimmered, frayed, then were devoured by the encroaching mist. Gone. A rapid blink fails to dispel the uncertainty. Was it truly there? These ephemeral conjurations of the mist, humanesque contours materializing only to dissolve, have haunted my periphery for some time now. Never solid enough, never present long enough for confirmation, before vanishing like breath on cold glass. A tremor works its way up from my knees. I propel myself onward, clinging to the desperate hope that the fog might relent further on. Instead, after wrestling through clutching undergrowth, I blunder upon it. A small cabin, a relic of graying timber slumped beneath a sway-backed roof, utterly incongruous, absent from any map I studied. Yet, in this moment, it represents the closest thing to sanctuary. The door groans open at my push. Inside, dimness reigns, light filtered through panes opaque with grime. A palpable quietude hangs heavy, thick with dust motes dancing in the gloom. My boots scuff across wooden floorboards, stirring the pungency of mildew and time-eaten textiles. An overturned chair sprawls near a table shoved askew. Leaning against the rough wall, I fight for breath, seeking equilibrium. My fingertips feel distant, numb. The cabin offers a paradoxical solace, deeply unsettling in its very unexpectedness. It has no right to exist here. My pack thuds to the floor. Water check. Enough if rationed for the night. I wipe sweat from my brow, forcing thought through the fog of fear. Dawn, leaving the little rental, exhilarated by the prospect of the climb. The city's relentless grind, the suffocating apartment. This escape to the mountains was meant to be restorative. Bitter irony. My gaze lands on a mirror, nailed to the far wall, its frame chipped, the silvered surface tarnished. Approaching, my reflection is a mere silhouette against the murky depths. A trembling hand lifts, sleeve wiping across the dust. The image sharpens fractionally, and in that instant, a flicker in the periphery of the reflection, a pale formlessness drifting past the dirt-streaked window behind me. I spin around. Nothing. Only the oppressive stillness of the woods outside. Back to the mirror. Just my own wide, fearful eyes staring back from the dim cabin interior. On a narrow shelf, a clutch of papers, brittle leaves with edges curled like ancient scrolls. Journal entries, survey notes. Words leap out, stark against the faded ink. Fog. Readings impossible. Needle spins. Night voices. A cold fist clenches around my heart. Another soul snared in this place. I riffle through them, the script descending into a desperate scrawl, ink blotched, letters leaning as if in flight. No dates, no names, only fragmented observations and complaints. No clue to an escape, if escape was ever achieved. Then, a sound from outside, a subsonic thrum vibrating through the soles of my boots, less heard than felt. Perhaps wind, yet no leaves rustle, no branches sway. It resembles, unnervingly, a distant droning chant. Ear pressed to the rough-hewn door, I listen. The sound recedes, then swells, a siren song woven from stillness, beckoning me back into the white embrace. My skin prickles. They desire my return to the mist. A hard swallow. Those fleeting shapes. They hadn't attacked, hadn't pursued. They merely lingered, just beyond comprehension, perpetually shifting. As if their purpose wasn't violence, but to shepherd me into perpetual aimless wandering until sanity frayed entirely. I slide down the wall to sit, knees drawn tight, focusing on the simple rhythm of breath. A plan. Without compass or GPS, perhaps the land itself holds the key. Downhill. Follow the gradient. Surely it must eventually lead back toward the foothills, the rental, the waiting car. Energy bars, flashlight, whistle. Inventorying my meager resources offers frail comfort. The flashlight, at least, casts a reassuring beam. I sweep it around the cabin's confines. It lands again on the mirror. For a sliver of a second, movement within the glass. The reflected passage of someone behind me. I scramble upright, light beam slashing wildly. Empty space, just decaying wood and fractured furniture. Staying is impossible. The cabin walls suddenly feel suffocatingly close. My breath comes in shallow rasps. Grabbing my pack, I push back out into the fog's clammy welcome. The humming voices have subsided, now a distant but insistent murmur. Choosing a direction, trusting gravity, the only reliable guide left, I begin to move, carefully navigating the downward slope. With every step, briars snag like grasping fingers. Wet leaves betray my footing. The thudding in my ears drowns the forest's silence. To my right, a shape condenses from the vapor, tall, featureless, unnaturally still. My flashlight beam hits it. It dissipates like smoke. I stagger backward, nearly fumbling the light. The chanting surges, louder now, its source maddeningly diffuse. Press onward. Minutes stretch into an elastic eternity. White vapor clings to my eyelashes, blurring the world. Nausea churns, dizziness waxes and wanes. Sweat, then shivering, then sweat again. My ears pop. A headshake offers fleeting clarity. Still, step follows laborious step. Stumbling over a fallen log, I concede the need for rest. Blind progress is no progress at all. Muscles scream protest. Tilting my head back reveals no sky, only the infinite depthless white. Have I circled back? Lost the downward path? The chanting fades abruptly, leaving a vacuum of silence that feels vast and consuming. I bite my lip, the sharp tang of copper grounding me momentarily. Rummaging in the pack yields the whistle. 2 sharp blasts pierce the quiet. The sound dies almost instantly, absorbed by the muffling vapor, returning as only the faintest, mocking echo. No response. Closing my eyes, I struggle to reconstruct the map from memory. The rental cabin, 2 hours from the main road. A clearly marked trail. Southeast should lead toward the river. But where is southeast in this disorienting void? The compass remains useless. its needle still quivering erratically. The GPS, checked again, stays stubbornly inert. Phone signal, non-existent, trapped within a bubble of profound confusion. Suddenly, footfalls, close behind. I bolt upright, heart seizing. The flashlight beam cuts through swirling mist, illuminating nothing. Yet the feeling persists, a presence, ancient and vast, passing nearby. The hairs on my nape prickle. Those journal pages, voices, impossible readings. Could this fog be more than mere weather? Something elemental, perhaps, enduring for centuries, luring travelers from the path, condemning them not to death, but to endless, panicked wandering. No, that will not be my fate. Teeth gritted, I force my legs into motion. The ground still seems to incline downwards. I cling to that. Keep moving, I whisper, the sound cracking. Keep moving. Each footfall becomes a mantra. Periodically, the outlines reappear, those phantom sentinels materializing at the edge of sight. I refuse them my direct gaze now, recognizing the lure toward panic, toward the futile circling they seem to encourage. My flashlight beam flickers, weakening. A constriction tightens my throat. I quicken my pace, the mist pressing against my eyes like damp cotton. The memory of the mirror surfaces, that fleeting reflection behind me. Was the presence in the cabin too? Is it somehow inside me now? A sharp pang in my chest makes me gasp, stumble forward. The chanting returns, amplified, a resonant choir seeming to call my name. It pleads for attention, urges me to turn, to follow it back into the fog's heart. My teeth chatter uncontrollably. Leave me alone. The shout sounds absurdly small, swallowed instantly. The chanting persists, but then it splinters, reforming as insidious whispers that seem to originate behind my own eyes. I swat blindly at the air, nearly losing my grip on my pack, driving myself onward, palms slick with sweat. The certainty grows, cold and heavy. I am walking in circles. The cabin might be just behind me, or ahead, or perhaps it never existed outside my desperate mind. Time loses all meaning. Then, something shifts. A subtle dilution of the white ahead, a promise of clarity, however faint. My heart leaps. I lurch toward it, forcing through a thicket, branches scraping, tearing at my jacket. Breath comes in ragged bursts. Step by painful step, the air thins perceptibly. I stumble onto a slope I recognize. This configuration of rock, yes, surely near the trail's beginning. Hope, fragile but fierce, surges. The compass needle still oscillates, but less violently now. My phone tried again, emits a weak electronic chirp, no signal, but not entirely dead. An exhale, a long shuddering release as I fight to quell the trembling in my limbs. Behind me, the chanting recedes, yet its presence lingers, a palpable weight on the back of my neck. They haven't departed. They've merely loosened their grip, allowing the illusion of escape. 10 more minutes of determined walking, and a familiar landmark. A great fallen pine I'd noted hours ago, in another lifetime. Relief, raw and overwhelming, threatens to buckle my knees. I am close. My head still throbs, but the world is regaining its solidity, its color. The vibrant green of moss, the rich brown of damp earth. The oppressive whiteness is retreating, though ghostly tendrils still writhe at the edges of my vision. I want to laugh, or perhaps weep. My body is a symphony of aches, drenched in cold sweat. I glance at my phone again. The battery icon flickers weakly back to life. My watch compass wobbles, then hesitantly settles, pointing somewhere vaguely consistent. Not safe, not yet, but closer. Rising stiffly, I take a few tentative steps, then instinctively check the reflective crystal of my watch. In that tiny curved glass, my own face stares back, pale and haunted. And behind it, just at the periphery, something shifts. A faint, indistinct outline drifting amongst the trees in the reflection. My breath catches. I jerk my arm down, heart pounding. The shape in the watch face is gone, but the knowledge remains, cold and sharp. It is still with me. Even here, beyond the densest shroud, the presence clings, a spectral afterimage haunting reflections. I cannot be certain it isn't following me still, back towards the mundane safety of the rental cabin, back into the fabric of my life. Limping downhill, I find myself constantly glancing over my shoulder, ears straining for the return of those whispers. I have broken free from the fog's deepest embrace, for now. But I feel its touch deep within my bones, an indelible stain on the psyche. My compass will never again feel entirely trustworthy. Reflections will forever hold a potential menace, scanned for that flicker of white lurking just behind my shoulder. The mist doesn't need to kill. It only needs me to remember. And I do. I always will. The urge to simply flee the theater that night was a palpable thing, a weight settling in my bones. My rounds were done, the checklist mentally ticked off. Weariness clung to me like the scent of stale popcorn, and the siren call of home was deafening. Yet, a thread of sound, impossibly fine, snagged my attention, issuing from the speaker linked to the primary stage microphone. A residual resonance, perhaps. No, it was melodic, a feminine voice tracing an unfamiliar ethereal tune. In that instant, the axis of my ordinary world tilted. I halted beside the hulking mixing console, my gaze drawn to the void of the stage, dimly lit and utterly vacant. A frantic drummer took up residence in my ribcage. No one occupied that space, and the entire sound system slumbered in standby mode. A phantom signal, maybe? Interference bleeding across frequencies? Logic offered flimsy explanations, none satisfying. Still, a final diagnostic sweep seemed prudent before surrendering to the night. Midnight beckoned by the time I concluded, scrutinizing every connection, every input jack. Nothing. Not a whisper of malfunction. But the melody lingered, an echo imprinted on my mind. Returning the following afternoon for the pre-show rituals, I found the familiar solace of solitude. Being the first arrival was standard. I functioned best without the static of small talk or inquiry. Power amplifiers hummed to life. Microphone capsules were tested. The theater held its breath, offering only silence. No crackle, no spectral voices. The evening's performance unfolded without incident. Afterward, during the quiet industry of breakdown, I moved across the stage, methodically coiling serpentine cables, securing loose ends. The heavy back door clanged shut and locked. The main stage lights blinked out, plunging the vast space into deeper shadow. Descending once more to the sound booth for the final shutdown sequence, I heard it again. The same disembodied voice, but the tune had shifted, morphing into a cascade of distinct, haunting notes. A visceral tremor traced the nape of my neck. My skin felt suddenly taut. Swallowing against a dry throat, I fought for composure. From the booth's controls, I reignited the stage illumination, bathing the crimson curtains in stark light. My eyes swept the auditorium. Empty velvet seats stared back. Barren aisles stretched into darkness. The stage itself remained deserted. Yet the sound persisted, undeniably emanating from the monitor speakers flanking the console. The fine hairs on my forearms lifted. A band tightened around my chest. Systematically, I muted each channel, one by one, chasing the source. The singing continued, unwavering, until the master mute plunged the booth into abrupt silence. The next morning, recounting the experience to Marco and Lena felt like narrating a fever dream. Their expressions, a mixture of polite skepticism and concern, spoke volumes. Fatigue, they suggested gently, played tricks on the senses. I offered no rebuttal, though conviction settled hard in my gut. I knew alertness from exhaustion. My profession demanded an intimate familiarity with the nuances of sound, every subtle hiss, every electronic murmur. This was my craft, not fantasy. During the afternoon lull, propelled by a need for empirical proof, I initiated a comprehensive diagnostic. Hours bled away as I meticulously examined microphone lines, wireless transmitters, frequency allocations. Every component scrutinized. No fault revealed itself. A part of me desperately craved the mundane relief of a technical glitch. Yet, a more insistent, unnerving part yearned for validation, for another encounter. Curiosity was blossoming into something sharper, bordering on obsession. That evening featured a vibrant musical act. I remained anchored backstage, managing the wireless mics while Ms. Albright, the stage manager, orchestrated the cues from the wings. Everything proceeded flawlessly. Post-curtain call, the familiar rhythm of my duties resumed, gathering equipment, rolling cables with practiced efficiency, extinguishing the stage lights until only the single spectral ghost light remained. Back in the booth's relative sanctuary, a faint chill accompanied the final shutdown procedures. Alone in the dim glow of the console, I keyed the main microphone. Test, level 1, 2, I murmured, watching the digital meters flicker impassively. Silence answered. A fragile sense of relief bloomed, only to be instantly shattered. A whisper breathed through the monitors, soft, sibilant, shaping my name, Elias. I froze, every muscle locking. It was unmistakably a woman's voice, low and unhurried. The console's meters registered barely a tremor, yet the sound filled the small space, undeniable. A hot rush surged through my chest. My mouth turned to dust. Sweat pricked my palms. I spun around, scanning the darkened house. Nothing stirred. The stage was a landscape of shadows. Leaning towards the microphone, my voice raspy, I managed, "Who's there?" Only a low, staticky crackle responded. Pushing back from the chair, I descended the booth stairs and crossed to the stage entrance, thumbing the switch for the work lights. Harsh illumination flooded the theater, banishing shadows, revealing rows upon rows of empty seats, the vacant aisles, the bare stage. Still no one. An inexplicable impulse made me lower my voice. "Is anyone here?" The question echoed, swallowed by the cavernous space. Silence was the only reply. I conducted a methodical sweep backstage. Dressing rooms, dim corridors, shadowed alcoves. Each space yielded only emptiness. Returning to the booth, I killed the power to everything. The clicks of the switches unnaturally loud. Forcing myself towards the exit, I felt unsteady. A profound disquiet settling deep within me. The following day, I mentioned it, hesitantly, to Rowan, our lighting tech. He offered a wry smirk and the predictable diagnosis: I needed a vacation. I couldn't fault his logic. It had all the hallmarks of a spectral cliché, but a gut certainty refuted his dismissal. Something was fundamentally askew within these old walls. That evening, I arrived deliberately early, a nascent investigator. Ascending the narrow stairs to the catwalks high above the stage, I scanned the dusty network of beams and rigging, searching for a hidden speaker, an archaic wire capable of generating such anomalies. I found only decades of accumulated grime, defunct fixtures, and tangled nests of forgotten cable. Nothing remotely explanatory. Around 5, Ms. Albright arrived, briefing me on the night's performance. A modest play, low technical demands. I kept my unsettling observations locked behind a neutral expression. Throughout the show, I remained tethered to the sound console, ears straining beneath the dialogue and sound cues. Everything functioned perfectly. Later, enveloped in the post-show quiet, the routine commenced once more. Clearing the stage, securing microphones, coiling cables, dousing the lights. Near 11, back at the console, checking a final patch connection, the air grew thick, charged with an almost electric tension. Then the hum returned, faint at first, but undeniably present. I activated the monitors. The sound swelled, coalescing into that strange, familiar melody. A peculiar vibration resonated deep in my chest. My gaze fixed, unblinking, on the darkened stage. Attempting to isolate the source, I brought up a single-channel fader. Instead of the melody, a whisper feathered through the speaker. "Come here." A full-body jolt shot through me. My teeth ground together. A sheen of cold sweat broke out on my forehead. The urge to cry out warred with a paralytic stillness. The voice repeated, softer this time, yet infinitely more compelling. "Come here." Its tone was gentle, almost beckoning, but it coiled like ice in my stomach. I pushed away from the console, the chair scraping loudly. Descending to the main floor, my heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. My legs felt like unreliable strangers. I moved down the center aisle, eyes locked on the stage, a maelstrom of questions swirling in my head. What magnetism drew me forward? Why this irrational compulsion to obey? The voice murmured my name again, Elias. So faint it was almost lost in the ambient hum of the building. My footfalls echoed as I stepped onto the stage planks. The floorboards groaned under my weight. Darkness reigned, save for the lone ghost light casting long, distorted shadows backstage. My eyes traced the heavy velvet curtains, the thick ropes disappearing into the fly space, the painted backdrop. All seemed static, yet an intuition, sharp and primal, insisted on unseen movement nearby. Slipping behind the main curtain, I navigated past skeletal set pieces and a dust-shrouded upright piano, silent for years. The voice ceased. I stood motionless, listening intently, straining to catch anything beyond the low thrum of the building's ventilation. My pulse pounded a heavy rhythm in my ears. Then, a soft, breathy laugh drifted from the stage-left darkness. I spun, stumbling over a coiled power cord, fumbling for the small flashlight clipped to my belt. Its beam sliced through the gloom, landing on a narrow door, the entrance to the basement storage. A space I seldom entered, known for its clutter and damp, musty air. The laughter seemed to have originated from that threshold. Hesitantly, I approached, the flashlight beam dancing over grimy walls, scarred flooring, stacks of discarded theatrical detritus. My hand reached for the doorknob. It turned, unlocked. Easing the door open, I peered into the abyss. Dust motes swirled lazily in the cone of light. The smell hit me: stale earth, damp concrete, decay. I took a tentative step onto the top stair, testing my footing. My shoe scraped grit. Behind me, the heavy door swung shut with a dull thud that made me jump, exhaling sharply. My hands trembled. "Hello?" My voice sounded thin, swallowed by the stone confines, echoing back unanswered. Pausing on the final step, I swept the flashlight beam across the subterranean space. Rows of metal shelves sagged under the weight of forgotten props, defunct lighting instruments, and spectral costume remnants. A few forlorn chairs huddled in a corner. The air felt dense, heavy. Reaching up, I found the pull chain for a bare overhead bulb. It flickered reluctantly to life, casting a weak, jaundiced glow over a kingdom of dust and cobwebs. I moved cautiously, peering behind shelves, under draped tables. Utterly empty. A creeping certainty that I'd made a grave error began to prickle my skin. An urgent desire to retreat surged. As I turned back towards the stairs, the voice whispered my name again. Elias. This time, it was terrifyingly close, intimate, as if spoken directly beside my ear. The hairs on my neck and arms snapped erect. I whirled around, flashlight beam cutting wildly through the air. A flicker of movement, a shadow detaching itself near a stack of leaning flats, painted canvas walls from some forgotten production. My pulse surged, a violent thrum that made the flashlight tremble uncontrollably in my grip. I tried to speak, but my throat constricted. My feet felt rooted to the concrete floor, yet I forced them forward, step by agonizing step, towards the leaning set pieces. My head swam. The air felt thin. Nothing lunged from the shadows. I continued to probe the darkness with the light, kicking aside brittle cardboard boxes, searching for a hidden figure. Dust and debris were my only discovery. Then, the barest sensation. A whisper of displaced air against the back of my neck, like a soft exhalation inches away. My entire body went rigid. I spun again, the flashlight beam painting frantic arcs across the floor. One word materialized from the silence, breathed rather than spoken, so quiet I almost doubted my senses. Stay. My knees buckled, vision swam. There was no one, yet the sound was irrefutably real, bypassing my ears to resonate directly in my bones. I stood frozen, struggling for breath, trying to anchor my reeling thoughts. My own heartbeat hammered like a drum against my eardrums. I was slick with sweat. Escape. The thought became an imperative. Fumbling for the pull chain, I extinguished the weak bulb, plunging the basement back into near-total darkness, relieved only by my flashlight's beam. I scrambled up the concrete steps, yanked the door open, and stumbled back into the backstage area. The familiar space seemed alien, charged with potential threat. Every shadow seemed poised to move, but nothing materialized. Placing the flashlight on a nearby shelf, I crossed the stage, reached the basement door, and twisted the lock firmly behind me, deliberately ignoring the faint, lingering resonance of that final word. I didn't pause at the booth. I powered down the remaining systems with frantic haste and bolted through the main lobby doors into the indifferent night air. Locking up properly was an afterthought I couldn't afford. My hands refused to stop shaking until I was barricaded in my own apartment. The sounds of the city, a thin shield against the silence I'd fled. The subsequent days were lived on a knife's edge. I engineered reasons to avoid being the last one in the theater, though the demands of the job often made solitude unavoidable. When forced to close up, I moved with unnatural speed, performing my final checks on the console, coiling cables with tense efficiency. One evening, seeking refuge in noise, I set my phone to play music softly, a barrier against the silence and its potential occupants. It proved a futile gesture. Minutes into my routine, the music abruptly ceased. A glance at my phone confirmed it was still powered on. The audio inexplicably paused, and then, bleeding through the monitors, clear as sculpted ice, the female voice. "Don't ignore me." My hands clenched, nearly fumbling the phone. My breath grew shallow, rapid. "What do you want?" The question escaped me in a low mutter, feeling absurdly theatrical, addressing empty space. The voice shifted, seeming to originate from directly behind my chair. "Follow," it commanded. My heart leaped, threatening to crack my ribs. Hesitantly, I moved towards the stage door, scanning the dimly lit hallway. Empty. The long backstage corridors stretched away into pools of darkness. I paused at the threshold, torn. Every instinct screamed for flight. Yet, a deeper, more perilous curiosity urged me onward. I crept through the backstage labyrinth, footsteps muffled on the worn floor, senses hyper-alert. A low, resonant hum materialized, like a single sustained note sung by a distant choir. It seemed to emanate from the stage-left area, pulling me forward. I followed the sound, navigating around stacked crates and rolling racks draped in ghostly costumes. The hum led me to a specific point, then abruptly vanished. A locked supply closet tucked away in a less trafficked corner. I tested the knob, firmly secured. A spike of frustration, sharp and unexpected, pierced my fear. An urgent need to know what lay behind that door bloomed within me, but I possessed no key. Reluctantly, I retreated, abandoning the quest for the night. Back in the booth, I gathered my backpack, the unanswered questions about that closet echoing louder than any spectral whisper. It was merely storage for obsolete sound equipment, a room I'd never had cause to enter. Tomorrow, I resolved, I would ask Ms. Albright for the key. Sleep offered little respite that night. The disembodied voice replayed in my mind, a relentless loop. The following morning, feigning nonchalance, I requested access to the supply closet from Ms. Albright. She retrieved a small tarnished key from a cluttered drawer, handing it over with an indifferent shrug. "Need something specific?" she inquired mildly. "Just doing a quick inventory check," I lied, the words feeling clumsy on my tongue. I waited, nerves thrumming, until the theater emptied again that night, craving absolute solitude for this next step. Anxiety warred with that strange, insistent pull towards the locked room. Around 10, key clutched tightly in my hand, I walked the now familiar path. The air in the corridor was sharp, with the smell of fresh paint from a newly touched-up set piece. My own footsteps sounded unnervingly loud on the concrete. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm. Reaching the door, I inserted the key. The lock yielded with a decisive click. Pushing the door inward, I fumbled for the light switch just inside. A single naked bulb sputtered to life, illuminating a cramped, dusty space. Shelves lined the walls, burdened with the ghosts of technology past. Ancient mixing consoles, skeletal microphones with frayed cords, Gordian knots of cable. Several large road cases sat squatly on the floor, veiled in thick dust. I stepped inside, moving slowly, scanning the clutter. Nothing seemed overtly disturbed or out of place. No obvious source for the phenomena. Then, the overhead bulb flickered erratically. A distinct chill traced patterns on my arms, accompanied by an odd, compressive pressure in my chest. The hum returned, subtly at first, then growing, seeming to resonate from the very walls of the closet itself. It was low, pervasive, filling my ears. Drawn to one of the larger cases, I unlatched it. Inside lay a vintage mixing board, its surface coated in grime, nestled amongst coiled wires and small boxes of spare fuses. My eye caught a roughened patch on one corner, tape peeling away to reveal crudely scratched letters, a name rendered illegible by time and wear. As I squinted at it, the hum intensified, vibrating through the floor, igniting a fresh surge of adrenaline. I glanced back at the open doorway. The corridor beyond remained empty, silent. Speaking into the confined space, my voice barely above a whisper, I asked, "I'm here. What is it you want me to see?" The hum abruptly ceased. Silence descended, thick and watchful, broken only by the ragged sound of my own breathing. And then, directly behind me, impossibly close, a soft, drawn-out sigh. I spun around, instinctively raising my small flashlight, its beam cutting through the sudden darkness. The overhead light had extinguished completely. A hushed whisper followed, formless words I couldn't decipher, yet felt as a warm, intimate presence against my ear. My body locked in tension. A primal urge to flee surged through me. Scrabbling blindly for the exit, I pointed the flashlight towards the rectangle of lesser darkness that marked the doorway, stumbling forward. Just as I reached the threshold, poised to escape, my name was spoken again. Elias. The clarity was absolute, the proximity terrifying, as if the speaker stood inches away. I froze for a heartbeat, unable, unwilling to turn back. My stomach churned. My legs felt watery. Then I was through the door, pulling it shut, fumbling with the key until the lock clicked home. I didn't run, but walked swiftly, purposefully, towards the main exit, not bothering with the remaining lights, needing only the vast, indifferent expanse of the night sky. Leaning against the cool brick exterior wall, I dragged air into my starved lungs. Sweat plastered my shirt to my skin. A dull ache throbbed behind my eyes. The presence, the voice, it had lured me to that closet. But the purpose remained shrouded in unnerving ambiguity. Was it a plea for discovery? A lure into its unseen domain? The theater itself felt sentient, watchful. I vowed not to return to that closet, not that night. Sharing this escalating strangeness with colleagues was pointless. Disbelief was a wall I couldn't breach. In the nights that followed, the voice persisted, an intermittent haunting. Sometimes a fleeting snatch of melody caught at the edge of hearing. Other times my name, whispered across the empty seats. The pull remained, a dangerous counterpoint to my mounting terror. I streamlined my closing routine, desperation lending speed to my movements, minimizing my time alone in the echoing structure. Yet, tension became my constant companion, coiling tight in my muscles whenever the last staff member departed. Each time the voice manifested, the dry mouth, the sickening lurch in my gut, the frantic rush of blood in my ears, the fear was fresh, acute. I still work in that venerable theater. Every evening, as the applause fades and the audience disperses, a familiar ritual begins within me. I brace myself. While checking the equipment, coiling the cables, my eyes constantly scan the shadows. My ears strain against the silence, waiting. The basement remains locked, its secrets undisturbed. The supply closet door stays shut, but the presence lingers, a palpable weight in the air, hovering just beyond perception. It wants something, discovery perhaps, or maybe simply surrender. I tell myself I can manage this, that it's merely aberrant acoustics, faulty wiring. Deep down, I know better. This is no glitch. It's real, undeniable, yet utterly unprovable. And every night, as the last one remaining, enveloped by the vast, expectant silence, I feel my body tense, preparing for whatever the voice intends next.